Good morning. Good morning. And congratulations to Unicinos for an outstanding event that brings together extraordinary speakers from all over the world in a world-class collection of presentations and speeches that all of us are truly honored to be proud of. I'm going to raise with you today in this short session the world premiere of what we believe is a new idea, uplifting leadership, how to uplift your performance, your people, and yourself. And the way we can begin thinking about that is I'd like to ask you three questions, and to imagine that you are in one of the following three scenarios. What would you do if you had just taken over a large manufacturing company that had just gone through 17 straight quarters in the red, and that put at risk tens of thousands of jobs all over the world, including Brazil? What would you do if you were the leader of a small developing country and you had promised your people that within just over a generation you would become one of the world's most dynamic economies? What would you do if you were a little football club, soccer team in England, and you wanted to get in to the English Premier League, the biggest global brand in sport in the world, and yet you had a smaller squad of players compared to the whole division and fewer resources than almost all the teams around you? What would you do? How would you turn failure into success? How would you create something from almost nothing? How would you make a lot from a little? Well, these questions aren't hypothetical. They come from a study that a number of colleagues and I have been doing over the last few years of almost 20 organizations that perform far beyond expectations in three sectors of business, sport, and education, on 4 continents across 8 different countries. The giant manufacturing company is Fiat Motors. Fiat Motors in 2004 was on the brink of bankruptcy when Sergio Marchionne came in to be the new CEO. After that, it went through 4 continuous years in the black. But not only that, it led a merger with American auto giant Chrysler Motors. The small developing country is the tiny island nation of Singapore that was described in 1965 as just a group of small tin sheds. Now, its economy is so successful that its GDP per capita is amongst the top 10 in the world. And on international tests of educational achievement, it beats out the competition year after year in science and maths. And the little football club is Burnley Football Club, which in 2009 became the smallest town ever to join the English Premier League, from one of the poorest communities in the whole country, with a population for the town that you could fit completely into the stadium for Manchester United. What explains these remarkable successes? Turning failure into success, creating something from nothing, doing a lot with a little. What did these organizations and their leaders do? Well, here's what they didn't do. First, they didn't aim to be number one, top, or even best in class. This was not their sole or their prime goal. How high you could get was not their major motivation. In fact, we know from high-performing countries in education across the world, like Canada, Finland, and Singapore, that they never got to number one by wanting to be number one. That's the paradox. You don't get outstanding performance by following the path to the top that people took before you. If you follow the path of others, the best you will ever achieve is getting as far as they did. You'll never figure out how to move beyond them and excel even further. None of these organizations raced to the top, rushed to the top as fast as they possibly could. In fact, organizations that do this often use up their resources too quickly and burn their people out long before they've reached their destination. And none of these organizations set targets and defined KPIs from a distance to push people into delivering results in a hurry, under threat of fear, anxiety, and consequences. These are the things that don't create high performance. These are the things that people do all the time. When you set targets and KPIs in a race to the top as fast as possible to reach number one, in business, this forces people to think in the short term, to concentrate only on quarterly returns, to engage in creative accountancy, even to indulge in outright corporate fraud. In education, it leads people to give up innovation and creativity, to narrow the curriculum, to teach for the test, and to have the learning outcomes that are exactly the opposite of what we need in the 21st century. And what happens in sport when we do these things? Well, at Burnley Football Club, we interviewed a guy who is their performance analyst. What a performance analyst does in football or soccer is he looks, pretty much every team has one, he looks at video data that's collected on every game about where the players play, how many goals they score, which parts of the field they cover, how many passes they make, which assists they offer for other people's goals. The video data go off to a company, they come back, they're analyzed, and then they're discussed with the player. At its best, the data can really help improve performance. But this guy told us, because he'd studied it for his dissertation, at one of the World Cups of soccer, some of the managers also did something else. As well as the video data, they put little microchips into the players' boots so they could count the steps, the number of steps that the players took during the game. And so the players would take their steps, and it was a measure of energy used. And at the end of the games, some of the managers would take the players aside, and they'd say, you know, you're not taking enough steps during the game. You're not using enough energy. So I am going to set some step targets for you for the number of steps you must use during a game. What do you think was the consequence of this? Well, the video cameras cover the playing field. They cover all the field. This is what the cameras do. But they don't cover what is off the field. So when the ball goes out of play, the video can no longer see anything, but the steps are still being counted. So the players, to get their step targets up, when the ball goes out of play, they'll follow the ball. The cameras can no longer see them, and then they will take lots of extra little steps they don't need to take in order to get their step count up. And this is what all of us do when we work in these kinds of systems. We take lots of extra little steps we do not need to take in order to get our step targets up. What's the alternative of these downers, these forces that drag down our performance, our people, and ourselves? The opposite is uplift. To uplift people, to uplift our communities, to uplift our performance. The concept of uplift comes from many places. It comes from geology, about the forces that act to turn plains into mountains. If you look on Amazon.com, Uplift will also send you to a whole set of books that will tell you about the history of the ladies' brassiere. But these are not the concepts of uplift that we have drawn on. We draw on the concept of lift and uplift in flight. We're not the first, but it helps us think about organizations. And when you're in flight, whether you're a bird or an airplane, you need 4 things for uplift. You need momentum. You need an airflow that is moving against you. So you need to be moving into something. You need wing technology that you can adjust and adapt with navigation that helps you take off. And you need some way of knowing how you are getting to the destination you want to get to. This is uplift. It's not only true of flight, it's true of organizations. So let's see what happens with uplift when we turn these 4 things on their heads. Oh, by the way, I also like to show pictures of family. This is my grandson, Jackson, Jianjie, Hargreaves, Lim. And in English, when you say the word up to Jackson, in Brazil, I believe you say come. But when you say up to Jackson, look what happens. His eyes go up. His arms go up. When you uplift people, you take them to the warmth and comfort and satisfaction of the loving arms of where they want to be. So here are the 4 uplifting forces. First is an inspiring destination or dream. To know where you're going and to understand where you came from. Martin Luther King did not say, I have a strategic plan. He did not say, I have a set of key performance indicators. He had a dream that inspired millions for generations to further the causes of civil rights and all those who were disadvantaged or oppressed. The dream of Fiat Motors was not to be number 1, but was to impose small energy efficient cars on the North American market at a time when Americans were buying completely the opposite. Imagine that. What is your inspiring dream? Where is the destination that you want to take your community and your people? And then when you take a pathway, don't take the pathway that everybody else has taken before you, but forge a distinctive pathway of your own, an opposite one, like taking off into the wind, using resistance not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity. Singapore has remained one of the most highly successful education systems in the world, because when almost every other country was narrowing the curriculum, teaching to the test, increasing competition between schools, in Singapore, the policy became teach less, learn more. Teach less, learn more. Create a white space for teachers to innovate in the curriculum, and then you're more likely to get innovation amongst your children. And although schools do compete with each other in Singapore, the second thing we heard a lot was that they also collaborate. And one of the sayings that Singaporeans said to us over and over again was, we give away our best ideas. We give away our best ideas because that makes us keep having to invent new ones. If you give away your best ideas, it's good for the people you help, and it pushes you to keep being on the leading edge and learning at the same time. Who do you give away your best ideas to? How does that push you to stay ahead? Third is sustainable growth. Organizations that perform above expectations, the ones that are uplifted and uplifting, grow at a sustainable rate. They do not try to progress too fast. We had an internet shoe company, for example, that set up in the 1990s, and it's called worldwideweb.shoebuy.com. And it refused venture capital when it started, refused it, so that it could control its own purposes and grow at its own rate without getting into debt. All the education organizations we studied at a high level, when they improve at about 2% per year. It is steady, it's authentic, it's genuine, it's not based on cooking the books, but over 10 years you get 20% growth and it stays. And at Burnley Football Club, when you go into the chairman's office, there's a framed shirt of one player. It's not the most famous player, it's not the one who scored the most goals. But it's the player who played in a game in 1987 when Burnley was 92nd out of 92 clubs in the English Football League. And had it lost the last game, it would have gone into oblivion forever. But it was saved by one winning goal, by a man called Ian Britton, who nobody would ever heard of again, because he was the shortest man on the field and one of the smallest in the game, and he scored the winning goal with his head. And the poster is to remind the club never to overextend themselves, never to get into debt that they cannot repay, never to be in a position because they might end up being relegated or removed altogether. How do you grow sustainably? How do you build success that lasts? And the last one is, metrics are important, targets are important. They help us know how we are progressing, whether we're moving in our flight towards our destination. But the best organizations that we looked at had shared targets that people owned together. In schools in London that we looked at that are dramatically turned around, in Hackney and Tower Hamlets, the schools improved dramatically because the targets for improvement were set by the teachers together and the schools together, not thrown at them from a distance. These are the four forces of uplift. This is what can transform your performance, your people, and yourself. Do not drag yourself down by focusing only on the numbers, how high you can get, and going there as fast as possible. Do uplift yourself by thinking first about how your community and what you can do for them, how you can raise your own, uplift your own and other people's spirits, and then you'll find you uplift your performance as well. If you're thinking about all these things, then you will know the secret of how to do a lot with a little, how to create something from almost nothing, and how, in the difficult jobs that so many of you are in, you truly can turn failure into success. Thank you for listening.